G'day, I'm Scott Sanders. Welcome to the Reach Australia podcast mission series. And you're probably expecting to see Dave Jensen. He's not here because he's on paternity leave. His wife, Samantha, has had a baby boy the other day. So congratulations, Dave. You've got me on this podcast, and I've got the pleasure of talking with Luther Symons from Hope Anglican Church. We're going to be talking about mission to new growth areas. There's lots of parts of Australia where housing estates are popping up and growth is happening. Most of our cities and many of our regional locations have new growth areas. And so we're going to be talking particularly about mission to new growth areas, but also often a part of that as well as reaching migrant communities as well. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're tuning in, I'm sure, because you want to see Australia reached for Christ. And this podcast, this mission series is all about how can we reach our family and friends? How can we reach lost people in Australia better? And it's great to have Luther, senior pastor, senior minister from Hope Anglican Church.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Scott. Yeah.
Now, you planted Hope 4 years ago, southwest Sydney.
Yeah.
It was basically dirt plains.
Yeah, the part that we're in, absolutely.
Yeah, kind of a couple of months before you came there.
Yeah.
Church was a garage or a big barn.
But basically it was a 6-car garage that we sort of converted into a temporary church building, yeah.
So Luther doesn't have the lounge room story, just with a baby. He's got a 6-car garage and his 3 kids and his wife Lenore and a dog and a whole bunch of people. You did a great work at sort of enthusing a launch team, and so you launched really strong.
Oh no, it was sort of started with Lenore and I, like it's just the two of us, and I think when we first drove down Camden Valley Way in southwest Sydney near where we were, and then thought, yes, we have to plant here. We just realised that something we hadn't really realised before, like that there'd be 350,000 people moving in that area in the next 15 years, and that wasn't on my radar. It was sort of, I knew Sydney was growing, but the need wasn't that obvious. And I think when we went down there and then realised that there was some great churches in the area, but no one in reach of this enormous growth. And we came home, just the two of us, and said, yes, we're going to plant there. We've never prayed more in our lives, like just the scope of the need, like the fields were going to be white for harvest.
Yep.
And us and a few others that we convinced to come with us. I think as I reflect back on those days, like when we went round to people's houses and said, do you want to move to southwest Sydney to join us in church plant? And I think when we did it initially, I didn't tell people how many were in the core team each time I went to individual houses, because I was afraid if they knew how small the group was that they'd not come with us.
Yep.
And eventually I think I went to one couple's house and they said, if we join, how many adults will be in the core team? And I said, well, if you guys join, I think we'll hit double figures, and so this will be great. But I think, Scott, the great thing about that is that people that join churches at that moment, that they become the 9th and 10th member, you know that they're just sold out for the gospel.
Yeah, what was really helpful, I think, you sort of had people coming from, I think, 10 to 13 churches into your launch team, which means there was a whole bunch of churches praying for you and sending you towards this. Now, you also started with a lot of experience as well. So we can see the grey hairs. The grey hairs have come.
I didn't have any before the church started. That's right.
But you were part of a church plant.
Yep.
You witnessed church planting up front.
Yep.
And so you went into it with your eyes sort of wide open.
Yeah, I think like some guys plant churches straight out of college, Bible college, and I think some are really ready to do that. And, they get assessed by others and they get the tap on the shoulder and they're ready to go. And I don't know if I would have been, and I don't know if I had the courage to do it, actually. I don't know if I trusted God enough. But all those reasons meant that we sort of did 9 or 10 years of ministry post our training, so, in other places. And I think, under God, it's been really good.
Yep.
But the massive formative moment was before Bible college, doing MTS, at a church plant, from the core team time up. And I think we'd seen it, and so in a sense it wasn't as mysterious to us.
That's really helpful. Now you kind of jumped into that apprenticeship and jumped into that church plant fairly soon after you became a Christian. So I want to hear, how did you start following Jesus?
Well, I started uni in 1996, and had really no plans to go to church at all. I'd grown up nominally Roman Catholic, so I sort of, with a name like Luther, obviously my parents had no idea. And so, but, went to a big, boarding school, and I think religion there was quite a focus, right? But the gospel itself and what Jesus had done was a mystery. But I was sort of curious, so I sort of went to different things. And I think I asked one of the Morris brothers at one point, can I be sure of going to heaven? Seems like a good place, but I don't know how this... And he says, actually, no, you can't, but just keep doing what you're doing and you'll work it out. And, since there I thought, wow, he's a priest, he had one job, to assure me of my place before God, but he couldn't do it. Yep. And anyway, so I left school, a God-fearer, but religious, but no idea. Was doing an accounting cadetship. I was sort of working at night. That's how I knew you, Scott, because you were doing the same thing.
Yep.
And wandered into night lectures at New South Uni and stumbled across a pretty girl that I really wanted to meet, who's now my wife, Lenore, and tricked her into a date. Well, not really. I asked her out and then everyone else didn't come.
Yep.
But on it, the first time we went out, Lenore had only just come back to the faith herself. And so she was sort of maturing a little bit.
Yep.
But she asked me a question. We were at a Thai restaurant on George Street and she said, are you a Christian? And I said, oh, yeah. And I sort of thought maybe I was, but also, and then she said, why do you think you're a Christian? And I said, oh, well, I'm good to my mum and I work hard and nice guy sort of, been to church, got baptised as a kid.
Yep.
So from that answer, Lenore knew that she knew enough of the gospel to know that I was definitely not a Christian and I had no idea.
But she persisted.
She did persist.
Well, so you persisted.
Well, I certainly persisted. And she said, oh, why don't you come along to my church? And I thought, well, fantastic. Like I actually there's something in me that wanted to go.
Yeah.
And also I wanted to get to know her better.
Yep.
So I went along and it was Christchurch, Gladesville. It was in a school hall, right, in Riverside Girls High. And I walked into the place and there was 200 people who wanted to be there. And the minister was in jeans and there was no marble and there was no guy wearing, robes. And it was the weirdest experience of my life.
Yeah, so it was a strange experience, given you'd grown up in a doing maths Catholic school.
It was nothing like what I'd expected. Then I sat down and there was this sense of community there and excitement to be there, which is I'd never seen in a church before. And but not only that, then the Bible was taught for 40 minutes through Philippians, and from week one, life changing. Like I'd never heard the Bible taught like that. And so the next 3 to 6 months, but then a guy met up with me, Dave Mears, who's now the rector back there.
Yep.
So many years later, he met up with me. We did 7 basic Bible studies. We played tennis and we talked about life and the gospel. And he slowly, patiently, graciously just retaught what it meant to follow Christ. And it was a profound experience. Like that church was doing amazing things. And I think I was sort of converted into Disneyland in many ways. And I think I realised that if the gospel's anything, it's everything. And I think the fire for mission started from the first time I got converted, I think.
So Dave's been talking about sort of the conversion that you need to have towards mission and evangelism. It doesn't sound like you needed one. You come into faith later on in life, a massive change. You didn't need to sort of have the light switched on that.
No, like I was 19, but it was sort of, and the way the gospel was being preached at that point, it was sort of take up your cross, follow Christ. God's mission in the world is to see his people gathering himself. What are you doing?
Yep.
And so I just thought, wow, and there was an amazing kids ministry going on there. Bruce Linton was an amazing influence on us.
And so you were a kids leader then as well, and were
within a year.
Yep. And then the decision to leave the heady world of accounting and go into a ministry apprenticeship, that would have been a tough decision.
Yes and no. Like I loved it, and by the time I did it, I was like in an advertising company, had a good job.
Yep.
And so in some ways it was a big shift, but it was sort of a shift that had been coming for a while.
Yeah, but then
And
the apprenticeship wasn't in Sydney. You moved
No.
to the Central Coast
yeah,
and the northern part of the Central Coast as well.
yeah,
So even further away from Sydney.
Yeah.
To be part of a new thing as well. So
Yeah.
it didn't even have the building, the lights.
No, we started
the
in a
wage.
No, we started in a lounge room as well. And
Yep.
Dave Sheath was planning up there, and he was the evening church guy. And I first was going to do a ministry apprenticeship, and Dave said, "Oh, wait an extra year." And I was crushed by that at the time. I just thought, but there were so many people going through that at our church, and in hindsight, I look back and seeing the caliber of people who were doing it, I certainly wasn't ready. I just thought I was ready.
Yep.
But then Dave said, "Come and Lenore and I, join us up on the Central Coast." Really formative time. Just terrific. Yeah.
So it's really helpful to hear you reflect on. The power of the gospel, the importance of people, sharing their life, but also sharing the Bible with you, regularly, and then actually being patient and waiting. I think often, there's this kind of push and this rush, but you have been very careful and deliberate about what you've been doing. So church planting as a missional strategy, why plant a church? Why not work in an established church? Sydney's got loads of them. Why start a new thing?
Yeah, like 270 parishes in the Anglican world. We've carved up all of Sydney. Why? Well, I hear you say, Scott, and it's right. New churches reach new people, right?
Yep.
There's something like in our particular place, church planting's obvious. There's so say Southwest Sydney, 300,000 people now, 650 by next 15 years. So I did a little calc and worked out if we reach 5%, which would be a start, we'd need churches for another 17,500 people in the next 15 years. And then I did the math and worked out, well, hang on, that means we need a new church of 1,000 people every year.
For the next 17 years.
Yeah.
Just in that part of Sydney.
So we need 17 new parishes of 1,000 people. And we need a planter every year, a core team every year, and the church needs to grow to 1,000. I think at that point you just realise that church planting isn't a strategy, church planting is a necessity. But in terms of it actually being missionally effective, like there's just something about when you get a group together and I don't know, the focus that a new church enables you to have that actually grows them. And that culture that they then have, every new person that bolts into that little core group sort of starts to live the culture that they come into. And so, it's often said church planting's for wimps. In a sense, give me under God 6 people who are sold out for the gospel, and then every person that adds into that, it creates a culture within that new church that then is able to reach out more effectively, I think. That's why I think new churches reach new people, because they're focused and intentional, and the core team sets the culture for what they're doing. So, which means you can do it in any church, right? You can repot exactly what you're doing. It's just slightly harder than starting from 6 people.
Yeah, I guess what I want.
I reckon.
I want to push back because it sounds like you've been really intentional and purposeful about making mission at the centre of what you're doing. But you can do church planting which actually doesn't reach people. So church plants can't start.
You just sort of drag in others from other places. Sure.
And again, that would be one of the critiques of church planting. You haven't really grown the church; it's actually been grown by others. But you were deliberate. You were deliberate about getting people onto your core team, onto your launch team, who actually wanted to reach out.
Yeah, and the reality is that church plants are going to grow in every way, right? They're going to grow by new birth. Yeah, actually, kids get born, and in our part of Sydney, there are just kids everywhere.
Yep.
And a key part of our strategy is kids ministry. But also, people will join churches that are intentional and focused and new and are reaching out. And like they will bolt onto that because they want to join it. And missionally minded other churches will send them. So that's going to happen. And yes, sometimes people will transfer churches, there's no doubt about that.
Yep.
And you've got to be deliberate to make sure that doesn't become your growth strategy.
So how have you been deliberate, other than making it a core focus of who you are, modelling it?
Yeah.
How have you seen sort of evangelistic growth being at the core of what you've been doing at Hope Anglican.
Yeah, I guess it's the stuff you do from day one. The great thing about a church plant is that you don't have to do anything that's been done before because there was nothing done before. And so I think the things you start with and the way that you start really sets a culture. So, I mean, the first thing we did as a core team is we went out and door knocked the suburb, and literally my kids and the core team members were wrestling on people's lawns that we didn't know. And I just thought, this is just the most random thing happening as we were sort of going out amongst the suburb. And that was effective. People came. But also what it did to the core team is it just said to them, this is how Hope's going to grow.
Yep.
As we engage with our neighbours, as we connect with them, as we provide them with an opportunity to hear the gospel, as we take the courage to ask them to commit to Christ, like that we're bold, and that we're always going to be going out. And so what you do, we hadn't even launched publicly, right? But that set a bit of the tone, right?
Yep.
And it exposed some of our frailties and our nervousness, and we were able to talk about that. So those debrief sessions after walk up in Willowdale, when there was only 500 houses, I think we covered them all, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Was really formative for that team, I think.
So is it
that was 4 years ago.
Yeah. Now is that an easier thing to do in a new growth area? Because you kind of there's a bit of hesitancy. It worked as a getting culture, giving people confidence, helping to train people as well.
Yeah.
But the brownfields area, the existing church area, would you be encouraging a new a revitalisation or repot to do a similar thing?
I would, but also what works in our context, like we were trying to think, we're in a new growth area, people are moving into, they're wanting to establish new friendships.
Yep.
They don't have, lots of them have moved away from family.
You've just got that opportunity, don't you?
There's just something about a new growth area that provides those things. That brownfields areas, it's a little bit harder.
Yep.
But that said, I reckon our barriers to evangelism are more about us. What's the stat? 40% of people are open or warm to a conversation about Jesus if only we chatted to them. What's that? How many million people are going to bed tonight in Australia that would actually engage us in a conversation about the gospel if we had the courage to start one? I find that personally challenging, and I think our core team found that challenging and just decided we needed under God to get over ourselves a bit.
Yep.
And so I think evangelism in brownfields, greenfields, wherever it is more about fostering a heart for the lost than it is about having the right strategy.
So how did you lead that as a senior minister?
Well, like you said, modelling it. So like when I was preaching early on before we'd launched, I'd talk about my personal evangelism, what I was doing, and some of my failings as well, because I wanted them to see that I'm not the best evangelist, but I'm certainly having a go.
Yeah, having a crack.
And that's what I wanted them to do.
Yep.
And also just talk about what God's doing in the world. Like, I think culture eats strategy for breakfast, and heart change will bring about behavioural change.
You talked about a prayerfulness as well. Look, you and Lenore going there for the first time, seeing the mammoth task, and being forced to sort of hit your knees and pray.
And so I'd love to say that everything I prayed about was about God being glorified, the lost being saved, people maturing in Christ. I also prayed that, Lord, like, are we going to make it? Will anyone turn up? Am I going to have, like, all the nervousness around the security that comes through doing something else, I think was stripped away. And so I think it exposed, me as a planter and made me rely on God. And I think that change in me helped. I think the first year of the church plant matured me. And I think some people watched that and were somewhat encouraged by that.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think that core team caught on to what was going on for me.
Because you had been part of a large team ministry.
Yeah.
The buck didn't
Which
stop
was
with,
great.
Yeah, the buck didn't stop with
I was
you.
an assistant. It was fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now you've got a team. So
Yeah.
the other thing, you started with a large launch team, but you also started with a staff team, of sorts as well.
Yeah. So Cameron and Rachel, so couple married, came with us from day one, and they were the third and fourth members of the church.
Yep.
And Cam had been an MTS apprentice with me at St George North years ago.
Yep.
And just come out of Bible college, and I said, look, when we're planting, why don't the two of us, why don't we do it together? And whatever support comes in, we'll just halve it and we'll see how we go. And that didn't end up needing to be a problem, but I think Cameron is very different to me and is just great at all sorts of things. And I think we complemented each other well. And I think that really helped us, I think, because we have complementary strengths.
Yeah, so
in the early days, team planting, like I'd really say if you can pull it off, I'd planted as an apprentice before. And so taking someone with you is just so helpful, practically, but also personally. So I'm glad that we did that. And obviously we've added more staff as church has grown, but that from the ground up, having
someone
staff team was helpful.
you
Yeah.
and someone who you had trained and knew well in that ministry.
Yeah.
Thinking sort of purposefully and intentionally, which is a key aspect of what I'm hearing as you talk about. What are some of the key things on the ground that you put in place to ensure mission was continuing to happen and you're building momentum for mission as well?
Yeah. So before we'd even started our first Sunday meeting, we sort of said, okay, we'll launch on this particular day, and we're going to do the first 5 weeks will be we're going through Luke's Gospel, a fresh look at Jesus, it was called.
Yep.
And then we're going to run a course in week 6 of the church called A Fresh Look, right? And I want everyone to invite friends to church, and then they'll come along and they'll do that course.
Yep.
And I could see a few people looked around and like, what do you mean? Like, don't you wait until a whole bunch of people sign up to a course and then you say you're going to run it? And so I said, no, we're going to run that course, and then in the next term we're going to run it in week 2, and then in the fourth term we're going to run it in week 2, and then next year we're going to run it in week 2 of the next term. So in other words, like, we're not going to wait till this is just going to be what we're on about. Like,
but there's an expectation as well that people are going to come as well.
And praying expectantly, so that people were. So I guess the calendar that we put together, which was pretty bare bones at the start, like it wasn't chock full of events, and that was deliberate.
Yep.
It was filled with mission stuff.
Yep. So that's the first thing. Put the mission stuff in the calendar.
And it drives the rest of the calendar. Because one guy came up to me, like, just great guy, and he said, when are we having our first men's event? And because he was so encouraging, like, I just wanted to encourage him. And I said, oh, that's a great idea. I call him John, right? Johnny, that's a great idea. Tell me, like, I've been to men's events before. Why do you reckon we should have a men's event? And he goes, well, like, you just have a men's event. And at that point I realised, you just got to get the guys together. And I said, oh, John, I tell you what, like, I reckon we'll have men's events. But, every time we do something, hey, we've got to work out, like, what are we trying to do through it? Yep. And until we can work out what we're going to do with it, how about let's catch up and talk about the men's event. But I think we haven't worked out why we're going to do it yet. So let's not do it. And thankfully he didn't go away discouraged. Like, I wasn't, and we have done one since, and he was a key part of it. But I think he could see, we're not going to do stuff around here until we've worked out where it adds in. And at that point, that's not something we wanted to do, because it really wasn't going to set the tone for what we wanted church to be about. Yeah,
which is like...
Which you can do in an early church, can't you?
But also, you've still got to have that hard conversation. Like, it sounds like the conversation with John was still hard. There's disappointment there. But there's a discipleship moment in that as well.
Yeah. And I didn't brush him off. Like, I think younger me would have gone, John doesn't know what he's doing. He's not on plan. He's not on my strategy. He doesn't, I'd take it personally, whereas I think I don't really try and do that. I just could see his passion for it. It just didn't work, so I just wanted to direct his efforts in a slightly different area.
So having mission drive the calendar, but also doing things or saying yes to things that actually see you achieve that, that high level outcome of making mature disciples as well,
Yeah,
and being really
yeah.
deliberate to say no to some things and to say yes to the things that are going to get there.
Yeah.
Now, you're 4 years in.
Yeah.
You've done the first term, the second term, the fourth term. You've now
Yeah.
done that every term for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
we have. Yeah. So I think we might have run a fresh look 13, 14 times. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you already talked about building teams as well. I imagine at the start that was you and Cameron running that with a small team.
Yeah.
Now I imagine they just roll you out, and you do the talk and then roll back into bed, or are you still involved, or is there someone else doing it now? How does?
Oh, in terms of mission, like that was actually one of the really hardest decisions I made at church. Because I just love mission, and I don't think just as a personal evangelist, but I really like gathering a team together, firing them up for mission, seeing them, I guess, directing the strategy, not just being the general who's asking the soldiers, how'd the battle go, but actually being on the ground with them. But I think what I realised is as church grew, that if mission was really going to be a massive focus of what we're doing, then it couldn't get just a day and a bit of my effort every week. And I came to the realisation also, if we're going to plant other churches, then we're going to actually have to train up a bunch of guys who are mission evangelist planters at Hope. And so I went looking for someone to take on a full-time mission pastor role at church. So now my role is to encourage him, train him. I always ring up Tuesday morning after Monday night fresh look and ask how it went. Because I have a bit of fear of missing out. And I really want to be in the room and I see the unbelievers who are coming on Sundays and are doing those courses when I'm preaching. But I've got to say that I want to be there on Monday night at Fresh Look. But I realise that if Hope's going to continue to grow and if we're going to plant other churches, then I've got to encourage that. But someone's got to be full-time in it. And we've now got a mission pastor, Andy, and he's just terrific. And
so
he's expanding what was there.
So that's helpful to hear. There's a grief, but you've kind of handed over responsibility. You've lit his candle, so that he can fire up, and you want to keep fanning his flame so he can grow, which is great. So it still is at the heartbeat, but there's a realization that for mission to grow, for mission to continue, and to resource it well, you actually need to hand it over. Now,
lots of senior pastors find that hard to do.
Yeah.
Because the very thing that gets you into ministry is the very thing that sometimes you've got to cede over to someone else in order for it to really go.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you're working then on with Andy as mission pastor? What are some of the big rocks? So you've talked about a regular course.
Yeah.
What are some of the other big rocks that you sort of put in place in your mission
well, I think
thinking?
In our in my Glazeville days, 20 odd years ago. Brian Telfy used to talk about seasons of evangelism, right? This whole idea of almost like a rolling calendar that starts with, big events that connect with whole bunches of people, and then sort of funnels down, if you like, into that opportunity to commit to Christ, right? And so that way of thinking that is, throughout Reach Australia and so forth, has been bubbling away with lots of people for a long time. And I think, so now it looks like my wife Lenore runs our community carols. We pinched that idea off Oran Park because they're in youth growth area. They went in, year one, ran a carols, lots of people came. We just realised what a sensational idea. And so now we ran it for the third time, didn't get to run it during COVID. 3,500, 4,000 people turn up. And so that's so that happens first week of December. Just as school is just about to end, before the craziness of Christmas. So we sort of get it in. I think if you're too close to Christmas, people, as soon as kids leave school or in their last week, parents' brains are in another space. So I think you've got to get in. It's got to feel like Christmas. So I think it's got to be in December, but as early as you can get it. And so that's our massive event. Hope is around, Jesus is alive. If you want to meet us, and people come and they have a fantastic night. Some people call it cultural Christianity. I don't think so. I think it's just a recognition that people don't know Christians. And so you've got to have some sort of first connection point.
So what the pushback that you're hearing in that cultural Christianity is...
this is their experience of the gospel is, Christians get together and sing, little kiddie songs
Yep.
about Jesus. He stays in the manger. It's not serious. It's just like a festival.
Yep.
I get how it can look like that. And maybe my Hindu neighbour who came along, maybe that's what they think. But the reality is that 4,000 people have got to have some sort of first exposure, right?
Yeah, awareness of church, and
Yeah.
you're inviting them to something next, so that...
So at Carol's, we're talking about two things. Christmas, although that's important, it's not our key moment. Surprise, surprise, we do a Summerfest mission. No one's ever heard of those before. But the thing about, so we have Christmas and then Summerfest in the middle of January. The thing about Southwest Sydney is not many people in Southwest Sydney holiday, in rental properties along the coast of Australia.
Yep.
It might surprise you to know that
they go camping.
They go camping,
visit families.
Yeah, or it's unaffordable, for people who live in our part of the world to do that sort of thing. And 2 weeks before school starts back, so many parents are going, what am I going to do with my children?
Yeah.
And so the kids at our church, we've been firing them up all December and the start of January to invite their friends to this, and so they come along to Summerfest.
Yep.
We're now right in the middle of a series, so we're recording this in late Jan, in a series Questions for God, which comes out of Summerfest. So people who come along to that, and parents who come to the Adults Cafe and everything, they're invited to that. And then, surprise, surprise, a fresh look starts in 3 weeks.
Yep.
So I guess, and that'll finish in mid-March. So I guess our summer season of evangelism starts the first week of December, and it ends in the middle of March. And it's a big event, Christmas, Summerfest, church, fresh look.
Getting them to engage in the Bible and getting them engaged with God's people as well.
Yeah.
So community, which is what I hear in your testimony, and engaging with God's word as well.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you're doing in terms of following up the Christians? So even in your testimony, you said it wasn't a, you were surprised by what was going on at Riverside Girls.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, I'm going to follow Jesus, straight away. It was 7 months, I think you said, that it took you to start, to actually make the decision. Yeah,
and I think this is what we've been realising more and more, is that like people will come along to course. They don't want to do a 12-week thing, like 4 or 5. But then after 4 or 5, a number will be converted, but then heaps won't be, but they want to keep going.
Yep.
So one of the great things Andy's been able to do is not only does a 4-week course, and then there's another one that follows that called Explore, and there's another one that follows that. So in a sense, it gives people an opportunity to recommit for another 4 or 5 weeks to just keep exploring. But as it turns out, those groups end up running for 3 or 4 months without people having... And then many are converted, in the third course, if you like, or in the small group that comes out of that. Some are converted in week 2 of a fresh look, you never know.
Yeah.
But we've realised that the jump from a beginning Christianity course to a small group in church, for many...
It's too big.
It's too big. They've got too many questions. And especially those we're seeing converted out of atheism, who... their whole worldview, they're not coming out of a sort of, I learnt the gospel at Sunday school and now I've forgotten it and I'm being reminded again. They have no idea. And so there's just so many things to explore, I guess. And so we've sort of got a bit of a pathway coming out of those courses to help them
move into it. And there's an expectation, as you said, the idea of a funnel. You've got the big leading to the small, constantly encouraging people to make, move closer towards, following Jesus and making that decision. Yeah. The conversion to small groups you talked about, that's a big jump. But what about just the conversion to church life that needs to sort of take place for a lot of people? You said it was completely weird. People were actually enjoying church. The guy up front had jeans. What are you doing in the Sunday gathering or in the gathering to reach non-Christians and to be sensitive towards that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like churches for the believer, with an eye to the unbeliever. What is Al Stewart? He talks about preaching to 2 audiences. Yeah. So if people are going to be confident to invite their friends, it's going to be because when I'm preaching, they know that their friends are going to be, they're going to hear the gospel. It's going to address them and their needs. It's going to be faithful, and they can trust it. So actually, Sundays have been a bit of a front door.
Yep.
So for most of our newcomers, their first experience of the gospel at Hope is actually on a Sunday.
Because again, that stat, 40% are spiritual, not religious. You know, they're wanting.
So they're actually open to a church invite. Yeah. Yeah. And so actually, church to the course is generally the pathway. But another thing we've got going at Hope is a bit of an experiment. And it's a bit of a variation on what we've seen in other places. We run this Friday night hub that we call it. It's lots of churches run youth group on a Friday night and kids club on a Friday night, and like that's standard and great stuff, right? But I remember at my old church, when I was watching, I'd drop my, as my kids started to go, I'd sort of drop them off. And particularly I'd see the parents drop their kids off.
Wait in the car.
Wait in the car.
Eat the dinner.
Yeah, or something,
read
right?
the paper.
Or drive off for an hour and a quarter and then drive back. And I just thought, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And where are they going? They're not making other plans because they've got to... And then in our area, so many double income families. At the end of Friday night, everyone is just tired and
trashed. Yeah.
So then we just thought, why don't we just do massive dinner? So at our church on a Friday night, whoever comes to kids club and youth group and their parents, we just all eat together. And then the kids go off to kids club, the youth go off to youth group. There's Bible study groups, we call them Hope groups, that meet on the church site on that night.
Is it adult home groups? Or
Yeah. So there's 4 groups on a Friday night at the moment who are doing that. And then there's just random parents that hang around because they're either not Christians or not part of church. And we just have dessert in the massive tent. And then sometimes someone talks about something, or otherwise we just sort of hang out for an hour and a half. And then the kids come out and they go home. And we've just found that connection point has drawn in heaps of people.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I interviewed Sandy Galera, and she talked about having structures that that actually help parents, partner with their kids on mission, or and serve alongside their kids. And so with their holiday kids program, she talked about team kids, and she talked about making space available so that parents can be involved. So actually caring for kids whilst the parents are doing team meetings and reflecting and debriefing.
Yeah, right.
It sounds like you've created a structure for youth group parents to minister in gospel to their mates and their friends.
Yeah, because now our youth group kids are saying, well, I want to invite my mate Johnny along. And then they say to mum and dad, well, you're going to invite Johnny's parents to the hub. And they get a bit, well, what do you mean? Like normally the dad would say, oh, no, we're not going to do that.
Yep.
But then a few parents have. So as parents of kids at church see other parents inviting not only the kids and the youth to come on Friday night, but their parents to come and have dinner with us.
Yeah.
People go, oh, is that what you do around here? And so it's going okay. So it's sort of like Summerfest, just every Friday night.
Yeah.
Is the idea.
So I'm interested. Like we, in the church circles we've kind of grown up, training's been really, critical. So you and I both went to university. We went to campus Bible study. We learnt 2 ways to live. We gospeled on the lawn. We knew the books of the Bible. I can still remember Archie Bullis, taking us through Sockham School of Christian Ministry and learning the books and doing a whole bunch of church history. Training, we're trained people, and training is really important. How important is training in the context of what you're doing with your mission and your mission teams?
Yeah. Like training's really important. It's just we're just thinking about it slightly differently in our context. So, not a uni context, so hard to get everyone in the same space. But not just that, I think, I don't know, in the Southwest, we're a pretty diverse church, so I don't want to speak about the demographic of our church, but I think lots of people will respond by things are caught rather than taught.
Yep.
So I think the best evangelism training is attending a fresh look.
Yep.
Watching someone else actually doing evangelism. So it's like walk up on the library lawn, but just in our particular context, it's like that.
Hearing a testimony and going, I could tell that story.
So I think people respond to stories and doing alongside.
Yep.
as much as they respond to reading and discussing.
So stories are another sort of profound thing. How is it that you capture them, talk about, life change? What do you do? What's worked?
I mean, we often interview people and capture it on video as well and distribute it in all sorts of ways, because I think this is something about constantly hearing the stories of people who have become Christians. Is there a better moment in a Sunday meeting when someone gives their testimony of how they come to Christ? But then when they've come to Christ through what's been happening at church, there's a confidence building moment in that. So it's been great. But also just interviewing the people who are out there evangelising their friends and connecting them in with what church is doing. And so people go, right, I want to be like, I'm jealous for that. But,
So they're your key evangelists, or are they just like you, they're having a crack and they're doing a good job sometimes and failing? Or
Yeah, so I think, we want that to come across. Like, the last thing you want is someone gets up and says, oh, it's so easy, and and they're just really articulate, and because then everyone goes, well, it's great for you. But it's great to get up the people at church who, some humanly speaking, might be just surprised, like, hang on, right, you? Right, okay. That is transformative.
Now, baptisms, you look at a lot of church plant, photos on Facebook now, and they've got the baptism pool, or they're in someone's local backyard. What's been your sort of regular rhythm of celebrating, baptisms?
Yeah, so in Anglican church, we baptise babies all the time, and they're born constantly every 3 or 4 weeks at our church.
So do you hold off and have it? There's a week where you do 4 at a time, or you sometimes do one every week?
Yeah, no, we hold off and have a
mass scattering of water.
Yeah, but with those who are coming to Christ out of, they haven't been baptised before.
Yep.
Totally non-Christian backgrounds, or have not been baptised as kids. Once a year. There's something about that day that just celebrates the gospel.
Yep.
As people see the gospel, in sign in front of them, right? But also just celebrating what God is doing amongst us, that I think continues to both celebrate the gospel, but also shows what we're doing. So in October every year, we have Baptism Sunday. We put it in the calendar before anyone's become a Christian that year, which says to people that we're expecting that God will work amongst us.
Yep.
We don't know what He'll do.
And why?
But they're just the best days of the year.
Why October? Is that when the bishop's available to come and be there for the confirmation?
Or? No, I love our bishop. He's a great guy. And but no, he's not available. He doesn't do the baptism.
Okay.
And we haven't had any confirmations yet, so I haven't invited him to do that.
Okay.
But I'm going to get myself in trouble in a minute. But no, in October, because it's the start of, we do a series for about 4 weeks called Building Hope.
Yep.
And Baptism Sunday is the first Sunday of Building Hope.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a deliberate part of your sort of announcing vision for next year and celebrating what God.
Yeah, Vision Sunday follows Baptism Sunday.
Yep.
Commitment Sunday follows Vision Sunday.
Yeah, okay.
And that happens every year. And so I guess we're in that moment celebrating what we're on about.
Now,
following on from that, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Southwest Sydney, it's a bit of a melting pot.
Yeah.
So, cross-cultural evangelism, reaching migrants.
Yeah.
In some senses, everyone's kind of migrating to the area.
Yeah, even from the Shire. Yeah.
Yeah. What have you been seeing? How have you sort of geared yourself up as a senior minister to be ready to minister in that context?
Yeah. So, it's just such a great part of the world to live. Like in our particular area, there's lots of people from South Asia. So lots of people from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. There's people from the Middle East, stack of Anglos as well.
Yep.
And so at one level, the strategy wasn't let's employ a minister who can reach out to a particular cultural group, because I realised that I couldn't employ 55 people.
Yep.
So we had to work out how is it that we're going to fire up particular people within the congregation from those particular groups to help us to think clearly about how we're reaching out to those particular groups. And so I think that's what we're slowly doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess we've gone, here's to use another phrase, we've gone where the waves are breaking. So early on, a really keen South Indian couple came with us who were keen on evangelism. And so we just realised that as much as we wanted to reach the Sri Lankans and the Pakistanis in the area, we want to try and reach into that community. And that's both had successes and not. So I guess you go with the evangelists that you find and are able to fire up, and then work out how can we go with them to then reach out into particular groups.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But you didn't go down the route, we're going to try and reach this group of people. It sounds like you built structures that most people could be a part of.
Yeah, that's right.
And that also gave attention to the reality that the 55 different countries in front of you were needing a course that was, like this, or a process and a train, and you're constantly evaluating that and saying, okay, what do we need to do to change it so that it's actually working? Yeah,
so like in our Sunday meeting, like, we don't yet have we don't have multilingual services, right? But at the same time, we're handing out things that are going to be helpful for those for whom English is their second or third or fourth language, right?
Yep.
But also recognise we can't do everything. So we've started English for Life. 10 women were doing that last time it was running. All of them were Muslim. Now we realise that God He can do whatever He pleases under the power of His word. But at the same time, that's a long-term work.
Yep.
To see those women converted to Christ. Having an effective mission strategy in Southwest Sydney isn't going to be running English courses that will reach Muslim women. We want to do that, but at the same time, we need to work out what are the big groups that we could reach into really quickly.
Yep.
And also in our area, there are lots of religious Christians who aren't Christian. So there are many people from Orthodox backgrounds, from Catholic backgrounds, who are eager to hear the Bible taught properly and are open to an invite, and we've worked really hard at connecting with them. Yeah.
Now, your final sort of thing, new growth area, you don't have access to buildings, ordinarily. Now you've got a...
We're on a farm.
Yeah. You're on a bit of land and you're in a 6-car garage shed, but you're building a building. What are your fears? Fears about a sort of a new building, or what are your concerns?
Yeah. Well, first thing I should say about the new building is, like, when I say we are building a building, like, the we is our partnership with the Diocese of Sydney.
Yeah.
Like, 270 parishes giving 2% of their giving towards land. Like, our land doesn't get bought unless that happens.
Yep.
A whole bunch of people giving generously to new churches and new communities. Like, we're the beneficiaries of a big partnership in the gospel. So which is
fantastic. That's a great story.
And our congregation is up for a fair contribution to that, what we're putting up. But could we have done it at this stage on our own? I don't think so. So, yeah. But what am I worried about? I'm worried that people will think we've arrived. Like, we're viable as a church, we're reasonably large, we've got a big youth group now.
And in your head, you're thinking, this is the first of 17.
And then we'll end up as ark painters. This is what I talk to church about, that like on the ark, and, we're just inside painting the ark, saying, oh, the ark looks great, doesn't it? And everyone's outside drowning, knocking on the doors, needing salvation, and we're just sort of, looking at the church architecture.
Yep.
If we get into the building and think, wow, all of our prayers have been answered, then we've obviously haven't been praying the right prayers. Yep. So I'm worried about that.
Yeah, good.
The staff team know that that's not going to be the case.
Because it is a huge blessing, and there will be no doubt a kick up in attendance, because people are already seeing that you're there and you're being there. But big advertisement. You've got a physical building now that says we're actually part of this community. We want to be part of this.
And some people won't come to us until we look established.
Like a church.
Yeah, because we look like, where is my cult leader at the moment? Like, it's a weird site.
Yes.
And only by God's grace has it grown.
Yeah.
Because if you look from the outside, it's the most unimpressive church site you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, it's so exciting. We want to see more churches planted in Southwest Sydney.
Yeah.
We want to see also loads of existing churches healthy. So some of those things and those tips that Luther's mentioned, you've hopefully heard a few times through the course of this mission series. But I'd encourage you to, think through one of those ideas and start putting things in place, or start thinking about your calendar and turning it towards mission, and start saying no to things that actually aren't seeing people won to Christ. So Luther, thanks for being so generous and sharing your story, but also sharing the stories of what God's doing at Hope Anglican Church.
Yeah, no, thanks, Scott.
Well, if you've enjoyed this mission series, we'd encourage you to share it with a member on your team. Particularly if you found an episode really helpful, share this story. I love hearing what God is doing in churches all across Australia, and I've always found the stories of others really useful in helping me think into doing ministry in my church and my context better. Second thing, we're in the next few months releasing another season of the Reach Australia podcast, all about cross-cultural church. We've got 3 excellent church leaders who are ministering in this space, Adam Chung from Melbourne and Peter Liu and Iggy Wong from Brisbane. They host another 10-episode series on cross-cultural church. Check out that season on your podcast app.